Okay, good day once again, BEC111 students. We are looking at the last chapter for this course today, which is controlling the management process. Controlling is basically one of the management processes or one of the management functions whereby the planned performance is compared with actual performance, and then managers will then take corrective action if there are any deviations. Because in an ideal situation, what managers or what one would have planned is what they expect to achieve. So in the control process, what we try to analyze, what we try to assess is whether what we actually planned is what is on the ground. And if what we planned is not what is on the ground, we try to also see what may have caused those differences or those deviations, and what can be done to ensure that we achieve what we planned. So basically, that's what we will be looking at in this chapter. We will go straight to chapter outline. In this case, we'll look at the introduction, purpose of control. Then we will also look at the process, the control process, types of control, then the characteristics of an effective control system, and that will be the end. So just as a way of introduction, after the planning process, managers would have said whatever they want to attain, whatever they want to achieve. So they will then deploy resources in terms of organizing. They also do everything that is needed to ensure that they achieve what they planned in terms of organizing and leading. But at the end, there is still need for controlling. That is to see on whether what they actually planned to achieve is what they are achieving, or is what is on the ground, is and also on whether they've actually achieved it. So controlling basically is comparing actual performance with planned performance. And if there are any deviations or if there are any differences, you take corrective action. So a control process is necessary for the following reasons, which we also provided on this particular slide. Controlling is linked with planning, organizing, and leading. So as I said, after planning, organizing, and leading, there is need for controlling to see on whether what you actually planned to achieve is what is on the ground. Did you achieve it? And if you didn't achieve it, what are the reasons why you didn't achieve it? And what can be done to achieve it? Controlling also helps organizations to adapt to environmental change. So if it's done in time, if you do the checks in time to see on whether what you planned is what you are achieving, you can be able to take corrective action in time and quickly adapt to any change that may have happened in the environment. It also, when done in time, controlling will also help to limit the accumulation of errors. Once there is a challenge that may lead to an organization not achieving what they planned, they can quickly take corrective action and avoid the accumulation of errors or even the effects of errors. It also helps companies or organizations to cope with the increasing organizational size, complexity, and any organizational change that may be taking place. Controlling also helps to minimize costs. Like if you realize that there is a possibility of an error happening and whatever you had planned may not work, you can actually take corrective action before you lose any resources. So controlling is very, very important for any organization, for any person. Controlling is very, very important. This particular slide basically depicts the control process. And I'm sure on this slide you can also see that the control process starts with setting standards. These standards are derived from goals. Then after setting standards, the next step will be measuring the actual performance. How have we performed, or how are we performing? Is it in line with what we actually planned? So the main intention is to control the planned performance here and the actual performance. So this will then be our stage 3, where we actually compare the planned performance or the standards that we set and the actual performance. So in terms of step 3, we evaluate the deviations. Are these two the same? What are the differences? Then stage 4, that's where we rectify deviations and we take corrective action. So sometimes you realize that planned performance may actually be below actual performance, and that will mean that we underestimated our potential and we need to revise. When we are setting our standards, we need to set our standards a bit higher. But in some instances, you realize that actual performance may be lower than the set standards, or it may be lower than the planned performance. And in that case, it means maybe we didn't foresee challenges. It may also mean that we overstated or we overestimated our potential. So we also need to take corrective action and revise. But the planning process, it is a continuous process. So in taking corrective action, you can still go back to setting standards and the process go all over again. So in terms of establishing standards, which is the first step, here you establish performance standards at strategic points, which will still need to be measurable, which will still need to be time bound, basically which will still need to be smart if we will go back to the planning process. Our performance or control standard is a planned target against which actual performance will be compared. So in terms of stage 3, remember this stage 1 or step 1 will be very, very important when we need to compare actual performance, because we'll compare actual performance with this set standard. The appropriate performance standards that can be used include profits, the level of profit that you want to attain, market share standards. If you want to gain market share, you stipulate by how much, what percentage. Productivity standards, you also stipulate how much you want to improve your productivity. You can also set standards in terms of staff development. Then measuring actual performance. This involves the collection of information and reporting on actual performance. And remember, this can be a continuous activity. However, activities need to be quantifiable before any valid comparisons can be made on stage 3. That's why we said when we looked at planning, there is need for goals to be measurable. There is need for them to be quantifiable. Important requirement for reports to be absolutely reliable for the measurement of actual performance. Then there is also this aspect of control by exception, where we say only important disparities are reported to top management in large organizations. Some of the minor disparities, you need to take care of them. You need to take corrective action as a manager. You don't need to just observe problems and report them. There is what is known as control by exception, where you only report important disparities, those that you cannot take care of as a manager. Then stage 3, here you determine performance gap between performance standards and actual performance. That's where you compare planned performance and actual performance. It is important to know why a standard has only been matched and not exceeded. So it's not like you only take corrective action when you have performed below standard or when you have performed above standard. But even when standard performance is matched, when those two are equal, you also need to be in a position to explain why they are equal and why didn't you exceed that particular set standard. Continuing with the evaluation of deviations, here it is essential also to ensure that the disparities are genuine, that the differences are genuine. So you determine whether the deviations are large enough to justify any further investigation. Is there need to really try to understand why there have been those deviations, or why there have been such differences between what we planned and what we achieved? All reasons for deviations and the relevant activities should be identified. You must know why there have been differences. Why are there disparities? Why are there deviations to what you planned? And those you need to know them. Even if you plan not to report them to top managers, but you as a manager, you ought to know them. If you had understated your potential, you need to know that. If you had overstated your potential, you also ought to know that. So you need to know. Then step 4, that's when you take corrective action. Corrective action needs to be taken to ensure that deviations do not occur again. If actual achievement match standards, then no corrective action may be needed. If actual achievements do not match standards, there are 3 possible actions that exist. That will mean 1, actual performance can be improved to reach what you had planned, or strategies can be revised to accomplish the standards. Revise the strategies, the means to achieve it, revise them. Even the methods of production, they can be revised to meet the state standards. Or else performance standards can be lowered or raised to make them more realistic. So sometimes we do not achieve what we have planned because the plans, the goals themselves or the targets themselves, they may be unrealistic. So in the planning process, you can still revise the goals or the targets. So there are also types of control where we can say organizations control activities and process in a number of different areas in the different levels in the organization. And there are 4 key areas of control in an organization. So normally in organizations, we control resources. So the 4 key areas of control, they mainly focus on resources. So 1 is the control of physical resources. Then we also control human resources, financial resources, and information resources. So the 4 key areas of control in any organization revolve around these 4 resources: physical resources, human resources, information resources, and financial resources. So this slide basically shows those particular resources that we mainly control in organizations. Then the control of physical resources. How are physical resources controlled? Physical resources, remember, they also include inventory. And for purposes of the control of inventory, there are 3 main methods that we ought to understand for purposes of this course. So there is what is known as economic ordering quantity, and in this case, this method is based on replenishing inventory levels by ordering the most economic quantity. the most economic quantity. However, the disadvantage of this control system is that inventory must be kept in the organization irregardless of the needs of the manufacturing department or customer for particular raw materials, components, or finished goods. So, inventory in any way, it has to be kept in the organization. And we try to order the most economic quantity, which will reduce ordering costs and cost of holding stock. But still, we need to keep stock. You must understand at this stage that there are others who see problems with keeping stock in an organization. Because once you keep stock, it also comes with disadvantages. Stock can be stolen, it can go absolute, like it can lose value, it can depreciate. There are lots of challenges that come with holding stock. You also need space to keep the stock, so you need to pay for that space. So there are challenges that come with holding stock. Then another method is materials requirements planning. And with this system, an estimate is made of the demand of raw materials and the components necessary to create a finished product. Inventory is ordered only when they are needed, and the cost of maintaining inventory levels are overextended periods of time are thus eliminated. So that's another system of controlling stock or of inventory control. Then there is also the Japanese practice, which is known as the just-in-time technique, where the philosophy revolves around the thinking to say we must not hold stock, be it raw materials, be it work in progress or finished products. So when a customer wants a product, we order materials, produce the product, and offer it to them. We do not hold stock. So that's a Japanese practice that you guys must read. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. In your prescribed textbook, you can read all these three methods on page 271. That is in the 10th edition, which we prescribe. Then there is the quality control process, whereby you actually measure quality. Quality can be measured in as much as it is subjective. I know some say quality depends on a person. It's very subjective. But there is also a process of measuring quality, whereby the first step will be to define the quality goals and standards. There are quality goals and standards. They are also given in your textbook, the ones that you can actually use to measure quality. The standards that can be used to measure quality. Then after that, you measure quality, which is basically you measure the actual quality of the product or the service. Then the third step will be to rectify deviations and solve quality problems, if there are any, in an effort to keep the cost of quality as low as possible. The cost, not the level of quality. What you have to keep as low as possible is not quality itself, but it is the cost of quality. Then the financial resources and financial resources and abilities are vital to the success of the organization, and therefore need to be strictly controlled. Financial control is concerned with the following. Basically, what you control in terms of financial resources, this is money in an organization, and it needs to be controlled, because many organizations fail because they fail to manage finances. So we are saying finances, they need to be controlled in an organization. Resources or finances, as they flow into the organization, cash inflow, it needs to be controlled. Then cash as it is held in the organization, be it in the form of cash, be it in the form of bank, it needs to be controlled. So you must not hold too much cash in an organization because it can also be stolen. You must not hold too much cash in an organization because it can also lose value in your hands. The very same would apply with amount in the bank account. Then financial resources that are coming out of the organization, they also need to be controlled. Cash outflows, they need to be controlled. Some organizations fail not because they are not making profits, but simply because they fail to manage cash flow. The cash that comes into the organization and the cash that goes out of the organization. When we finally look at financial management as a topic, you will realize that there are certain organizations that are making profits today, but they still fail because they fail to manage cash flow. So cash flow needs to be controlled. And to manage, to control financial resources in an organization, it is important to say we make use of budgeting. So budgets, they allow us to plan for what we are going to use, what we have, and how we are going to use it. Budgeting will also allow us to revisit the budget and see if we have been able to stick to what we have planned. So for purposes of this course, you will also need to know the types of budgets that can be used in organizations. Then to aid also in the control process of financial resources, we have what are known as financial ratios. Solvency ratios, liquidity ratios, profitability ratios, all those, they are used to control financial resources. We can actually use them also to see if we have performed above what we have planned or below what we have targeted. These speak of types of budgets, where we have financial budgets, operational budgets, and non-financial budgets. What they focus on, and the examples they are given in this particular slide. Then control of information resources. Information need to be controlled. Because if it's not properly managed, it can reach our competitors and we can lose business, or we can be out of business. So relevant and timely information must be made available to management during the management process, because this is vital in monitoring how well goals are accomplished. You also need information to be able to assess how you are achieving the goals. The faster feedback is received, the more effectively the organization's control systems function. This slide is speaking in terms of the control of information resources. However, we ought to also understand that information as a resource, it needs to be managed. It doesn't just have to flow out of the organization without being controlled. Then people, their performance can also be measured. And we can also try to assess on whether you have actually performed according to the set standard. So this function falls within the human resources management, and the main instrument used to control organizations' human resource performance is measurement, which is basically performance measurement, where we should be able to actually measure performance of a person using certain set standards. Other human resource control instruments include specific ratio analysis that can be applied to labor turnover, absenteeism, composition of the labor force, and so forth. Characteristics of an effective control system, those 5 characteristics are very, very important, including that it must not be complicated, it must be easily understandable, and it must be easily applicable. It must also be very accurate so that you can take corrective action where there is need. Otherwise, you take corrective action where you are actually supposed to applaud people and celebrate them if it is inaccurate. It also ought to be flexible. Then it must be done in time, not when it's too late. Integration, it must be integrated. It should be integrated also with the planning process. You cannot control without revisiting planning, what you actually set to achieve. So there is integration of planning and controlling. Planning system and the control system, these two are integrated. So this is what we are trying to explain on this particular slide. So basically that was it about controlling. Control is a fundamental management function and is the final step in the management process. It focuses on all activities in the organization, and effective control systems are characterized by the extent to which planning and control are integrated. Application of control system should not become so complex that it costs more than it saves. This is it about controlling. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, remember you can still ask on Blackboard so that we can attend to those. Thank you so much.